Welcome to the 4 Habits podcast, where we help you build relationships that thrive at home, at work, and in life. We're Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, and every week we bring you actionable insights to create meaningful connections and lasting success. So let's dive in.
So in this episode, we'll be talking about humor and resilience as caregivers, especially that moment when we transition from the role of son or daughter into parenting or parents. So today we're delighted to be in conversation with Mark Steven Porro. Mark, thank you for giving us your time.
My pleasure, and thank you for letting me share my story.
Well, we're really looking forward to diving into this. So many of us are at that stage or getting into that stage. But as our audience will know, we want to give you your proper introduction. So Jon's going to share the bio.
Love doing this bit. Love it. Alrighty. So here we go. So Mark Steven Porro is an award-winning author and storyteller, best known for his book, A Cup of Tea on the Commode.
There's a title.
There you go. His humorous yet heartfelt memoir about becoming a full-time caregiver for his mother at age 55. I guess that was him at 55, not his mother at 55. But
yes, different story.
Yeah, exactly. With a background in design and a career in Hollywood before relocating to southern France, Mark blends humor and honesty to inspire others, especially men, us guys, to embrace caregiving with love and laughter. His memoir, an Amazon bestseller with 14 literary awards, highlights the unexpected joys of caregiving. Passionate about storytelling, Mark encourages resilience and compassion in navigating life's toughest stories. So, Mark, so many people find themselves unexpectedly in this role of caregiver, unprepared, overwhelmed quite often. You've been there. What's one thing that you wish someone had shared with you on this journey to help you get going?
Wow. I was very fortunate with my upbringing with both parents. But when this incident happened, which was in shortly after my mom's 89th birthday, hospice was already called. The doctor called off all meds and food and said, let her transition. She's going. Wow. And so I have 5 brothers and sisters. And so all 6 of us were at bedside and we were preparing to say goodbye. And, but hospice was there, and my younger sister and I hung out with hospice as much as we could. We wanted to learn as much as we could because we wanted to take care of mom as much as we could, as long as she was going to be here. So we wanted to know that her family was here. We loved her. And so hospice was very generous in their advice and their tips. And so I would say the first thing was learn from the pros. There's a lot of things that, simple things, but also more difficult ones is like changing the bedding with a helpless patient in bed. We learned how to treat bed sores and changing the diapers and things like that, and the sponge bathing. But it was important, at least for us, because my mom at that point, for a number of weeks, rarely opened her eyes, didn't speak a word, but she did respond to touch. And it's interesting, they say when people are in comas, they can hear things. So I called it, medically, maybe it wasn't correct, the semi-comatose state. So we kept talking to her and holding her hand and giving her a kiss on the forehead and things like that. And she seemed to respond to that. And I think that's what kind of helped her break free and come back to us, because there was love back in the house. I think it was gone for a bit. And I have a chapter in the book I call The Silent Scream, and I think this might have been a silent scream for help. Yeah, she wanted love back into her house and back into her life, because I think at that point she suffered from depression throughout her life, but she kept it well hidden from us, but less so in the last few years. And I think she looked around and said, boy, if this is going to be the end of my life, I'm not happy, so I'm out of here. I'm going to go off to the next one. And but when we came back and brought love back into the house, I think that she said, yeah, I'm going to give this a second try. So
Wow.
she did. So.
I was going to ask for a sense of a timeline.
Exactly that.
Because you spoke about when she was in
Hospice and
hospice, but were you involved in caregiving before? Give us a little bit of the context.
Okay.
Of
Well, she was fine. Before this incident, she was living in the house we all grew up in. And we had, she could still walk, and she went to a senior center a number of times during the week to keep active and stuff. But she could kind of pretty much take care of herself. But we had a family move in upstairs, built like an apartment in our house. And they were overseeing household duties and did grocery shopping and laundry and cooked for her. And then as her personal hygiene habits started to decline, we brought someone in to help her bathe in the morning and bathe at night, getting ready for bed. Yeah. And, but I think, after a few months of that, she kind of said that, I'm not happy doing this. So, yeah. And then when I jumped in, I didn't jump in full time right away. I was there for several weeks and wanted to make sure she was, on the mend before I went back to LA. I still had my business I had to deal with. And so I left maybe in May. So I was there for maybe 2 months, a little longer than that. But I knew hospice was going to be there for at least in New Jersey when they're called. They stay for 6 months maximum. But usually when they're called, the ending's not good. Yeah. But in this case, we had a couple hospice nurses that broke the rules. The mandate was from the supervisor or the first nurse that came in and assessed my mom's condition was, she's transitioning. So no food, no meds, don't get her out of bed, and don't offer her food. And she wasn't responding to any of that anyway. But we found out since she was there for a while, we had a rotating crew of hospice nurses come in. And we learned that each of them seemed to prescribe their own medicine. So, my sister and I used to greet them when we saw a few starting to break the rules. We used to greet them at the front door with the directive from their supervisor. Okay. And so this one nurse, this is probably 3 weeks in. Again, no food, no nothing, hasn't left the bed, hasn't spoken. And she looked at the directive, no food, no meds, blah, 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 got it. She goes, yes, I got it. She walked right into my mother's room and she said, Mrs. Porro, are you hungry? and my mother's eyes shot open like a dinner bell rang. And my sister and I almost jumped over the bed to strangle this nurse. And then she accused us of starving our mother to death.
There you go. Yeah.
Which, I've learned after doing some research and sharing my story that some children do this. But this wasn't the case with us. And so we said, go call your supervisor. And so she called her supervisor and again accused us of starving our mother to death. And the supervisor said, no, these were the rules. So leave. We're going to bring another nurse in. In the meantime, I'm feeling really guilty thinking that maybe the original assessment was incorrect. They're not perfect. They make some mistakes. And so I go into my mother and I said, Mom, are you hungry? And her eyes opened up and she said, what do you got? And again, these are the first words probably in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks. Oh my God.
And I said, well, anything you want. And she says, well, at this point it's March. And she says, how about some pumpkin pie? And in America, it's not pumpkin pie season until, the fall.
Oh, yeah.
And so I go, well, okay. So my brother who lived locally was in the living room. And I asked him if he wanted to take on the challenge or go find some pumpkin pies.
Something
by
somewhere.
Some small miracle, he came back within probably a half hour with 2 pumpkin pies. I don't know where he got them, if he baked them himself or what, but they were pumpkin pies. And so I gave Mom a spoonful, and she spit the first spoonful out because it was her first food in weeks. I said, well, that didn't go so well. But the second spoonful was very successful. And she downed probably half the pie, and she was back. That gave her enough energy, and it was great. Wow. And I hadn't been there. I knew she was back because I hadn't been there in a few months because she became this grumpy, I called her Archie Bunker character. She was this grumpy thing, and it just wasn't pleasant to be around. And if you stuck around, she would make you as miserable as she was. So I stayed away. I called her and things like that, but it had been several months. So after she had enough of the pumpkin pie, she looks at me and she says, "It's been a long while since I've seen you." And I'm like, "Oh,
She's
well,
back.
she's still tripping, so she's back."
She's
So,
back.
it was great.
But give us a sense for time frames when the and what happened for what was this something that triggered? Did she have an incident or something for all this to come to a head? But also give us a sense for time frame. What were the hospice? What were the doctors saying about how long to expect? All that kind of stuff. Did you go into this thinking, well, we've got a few weeks here to go, and then mom will be transitioned, or what was the expectation there?
Well, I don't know exactly what triggered it, but there was some tension with her and the people who were living upstairs.
Okay.
And I noticed it when I did visit, but nobody was willing to really intervene at that point. My brother, who hired them, this was the third group that we had living up there. At this point, it was like maybe 3 years that mom was at home with people in the house
Right.
overseeing things. And the first lady who came in, she came in with a young daughter. She was a nurse who worked at the hospital, which was only 4 blocks away. So we thought, oh, this was great. Well, she turned out to be a bit wacky, and that didn't work out very well. The next group we had were the gentleman was a caretaker or a care. I wouldn't say caretaker, but he was hired by like very wealthy families, and he was very good handyman. So he was
Okay.
perfect. And the wife, I think, was also a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And they loved my
Okay,
mother, and my mother loved them, and it was great. But after a year or so, they saved enough to buy their own home.
Okay.
And we maintained a nice friendship with them. So they were lovely.
Yeah.
This other group came in. At this point, they were living there probably 3 or so years. And they hid it very well. And my mother kept quiet, but she was not happy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there was one incident, but I think it was just a buildup of time saying, if these people are going to be in my life, I'm out of here.
Right.
And there was a lot on my brother's shoulder who did all the hiring. So onboarding a new group was something he was not looking forward to. And then during this process, my adventures, I say, were 3.5 years with mom. During that process, I actually interviewed people to try to find a full-time caregiver before I jumped in. And boy, that interviewing process is very difficult. Find someone you trust who's qualified. And so I could understand my brother's position saying, listen, it's better to have, his axiom was, better to have warm bodies in the house than nobody.
Yeah.
And
I'd love to know, Mark, when was that moment for you where you had to make the mental shift from being a son to being a caregiver to parenting your mom? Do you remember that moment and what it felt like to make that transition?
And what helped you make that transition?
Yeah, I think that, well, during this process, so I was there for, let's say, a few months, and I knew my mom deserved better. She was a very cool lady, a good mom and all this stuff. And her environment was no longer the house that we grew up in. All of her things were like kind of sequestered in her bedroom. So there was very few Porro items still around the house. These people kind of took over. And that was a shame. And the house needed some repair work. My brothers were there, and I hope they don't listen to this. There were some things that should have been done that wasn't done as far as repairing the home. And but I knew my mom deserved better. But again, with my circumstance, I wasn't ready and or willing, I guess, to jump in full time. But in September, I came back for her grandson's wedding, and I took care of her again for a couple of weeks. So the people who were supposed to take care of her, I said, take a few weeks off. I'm back. And I saw how happy my mom was. And for the wedding, it was her first time out of the house since this incident. Wow. And I got her all dolled up for the wedding and treated her like a queen. And she was happy, and everybody around her was happy. And it was apparent that she needed something like this. And so I asked her for permission. I said, do you want me to come back and make sure that you're treated like this all the time? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. And she smiled, and I said, so if I do this, first of all, you have to know we're going to have fun. And second of all, that means I'm in charge. So you must now obey me. And her mood completely changed.
You child, me parent.
Yeah. And then she puckered up for a kiss. And I wasn't sure if that was a sign of surrender or one wishing me luck. And so I gave her a kiss and hoped for the best. So once she gave me permission to come back, then I started. So the decision was easy. Working out the logistics was a little tough because I still had to go back to LA every few months. So I went back and started tying up loose ends in LA, and then moved back in December. But again, I was in a supervisor role. So we had some caregivers there part-time. And what was great also with them is I learned a lot.
Yeah.
So we had all these professionals there. And so I hung out with them as much as I could to learn. And maybe back in my mind, I said, eventually I'm going to be doing this. And then once we interviewed and weren't successful with that, that's when I said, I got to do this. So
they interviewed for the people to live there as opposed to the nurses who came in.
Right. So to look for a 24/7 caregiver was not successful other than me. So that I jumped in and said, okay, this is it.
But you still had support from caregivers who would come during the day, or was it
at that point I took on the 24/7.
Oh wow, okay. And yeah, okay.
But I still had I had 5 siblings, and 2 lived locally, and they were great. My older brother would come in on Tuesday nights and cook dinner and get mom ready for bed at night. So he kept in practice in case I needed help. But other than that, it was all on me. And it was great. I went in and said, with mom, we're going to have fun. And she was a very funny lady. And my dad was funny. And luckily, they passed that on to us. So a sense of humor was a big part of this. Because there's times where, it's very stressful emotionally, physically, and mentally. And a sense of humor really helped.
Well, maybe sense of humor continued to play a part in this, because I want to see or understand what this might have done to the relationship between yourself and your siblings and between them and mom. Because I'm guessing this will have now elevated you to the status of favorite son. Your involvement at the end here. So how did that play out?
She would not admit that. And so I have a thing. So again, she suffered a little bit of dementia, and later on, a doctor who came in for house calls did an Alzheimer's test and said she's got a little bit of Alzheimer's. At that point, she was 91 and a half. Right. And I said, please, I couldn't pass that test. But my siblings were again, very supportive, and they yielded. They even got to a point where they would ask me when they can come over. And I would say, this is your house. What are you talking about? But they loved, I think, how mom was reacting and how she was treated and how she looked. I was the youngest son, the 5th out of the 6, but also the tallest. So maybe that had something to do with it. And I took I think what's interesting, I guess, the caregiving usually falls still primarily on the daughters and the wives and stuff like that.
Especially with the mom.
We're catching up.
Yeah.
So I took a bit of a romantic approach. I had a really fun relationship with mom. And so the first thing I wanted to do, she had these drab night dresses and day dresses, and her hair wasn't as nice as it could be. And this point, it was very long again, which was lovely. After having 6 kids, it was a perm and up. So she had when she went to the beauty parlor, it was a shampoo and a set kind of thing. Now it was long hair, so but it was like in a lifeless bun on top of her head, and the clothes were terrible. So I bought her a new wardrobe. I said, I want my mother looking like an old lady. I want to buy a new wardrobe, and if you want to cheer anybody up at any age, a new wardrobe will do it. And so,
indeed.
But there were some drawbacks to that. So you have a middle-aged guy looking for lingerie for a senior citizen in the stores was a little creepy. The looks I get, and the dirty old ladies looking at me, and the sales clerks going, But I did discover a fashion niche that needs to be filled, and is attractive clothing for seniors,
Yeah.
or bed clothing and stuff. And so I went online and put in like nightwear and daywear for seniors, and came up with the same stuff I saw in the stores, which was just the same stuff my mom was wearing, just in better condition.
Yeah.
So then I took off seniors and then went with that, and all kinds of lovely things came up. So I bought her some nice things that would go well with her complexion, with pinks and sky blues and things like that. And when I say, dare I say, sexy black, and her legs were still in great shape for her age and lack of mobility. So I bought them on the shorter side to show off her legs, and she loved that.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. And that was the first thing. And then while I was there, so it was 3.5 years while I was there, because she was like a baby, she slept a lot during the day. So I decided to renovate the entire house. So I wanted to return dignity not only to her, but to her home.
Yeah.
And involved her in all the phases. And she picked paint colors. And one time was pretty funny. I put carpet samples when we were doing the carpet in the basement. So they were like 3-inch carpet samples. So I put 2 of them on her breakfast plate, and then went in to refill her sippy cup, and came back and she had one of those in her mouth
Oh, dear.
with a scowl on her face. And she says, "This is not a cookie." And I said, "No, Mom, it's a carpet sample. Which one tastes better?" And she chose well. So that's the carpet we went with in the basement. But
you know, I love you used the word that I was going to suggest, which is you brought dignity into her life, both in the way you cared for her and cared for the home, made her know that she still matters at that age. There are many people now in what's called a squeezed generation. They're still looking after kids who aren't quite at uni, and now they're looking after elderly parents and squeezed in the middle. What were your circumstances that allowed you to, I suppose, leave what you were doing in LA and come and look after your mom? And I asked that to get insight for that squeezed middle generation.
Well, I guess maybe to flesh that out a bit, was it an easy decision to have to say, look, I can just park this stuff here, my business, that sort of business side of things, and let's go do this for a while? Or how tough challenging was that for you?
Well, the decision was easy. Working out the logistics took some time. Again, I was never married, had no children. And the only thing, at that point, I was an actor in Hollywood, but I was aging out because I had a pretty good run, but things were slowing up for me. And so I could let that go. The snack food business, as long as I could go back every couple of months to produce what I needed to cover a couple of months, we were good. And whenever I went back, it was for 1 week, and my sister, who lived in California also, would fly in and fill in for me. So we always had a family member there, which was good. So that made that so much easier. So that's where the siblings really were very helpful. So I could leave, though it was still pretty funny. So I felt bad for my oldest sister, is the one that lived in California. And I think as she's told me, Mom was a lot tougher on the girls than she was on the sons. And so Laurel did not enjoy this as much as I did, let's say, put it that way. And she said she had a 7-day limit anyway. So this was perfect before she blew her top. And so, but whenever I would leave, my mother, again, I treated her like a queen. So when I was about to leave the first time, she goes, "Well, when are you coming home?" I said, "Mom, I'm going for a short time. Laurel's going to be here." "When are you coming home?" And then, so at this point, we had iPads. So when I would go away, she would be on an iPad and I'd be on my computer, so we could visually see each other.
Yeah.
And every time I called, my poor sister was sitting next to my mother, and my mother would, "When are you coming home?" And I felt terrible. Anyway.
It was landing powerfully.
Yeah. So that was, I guess, a nice feather in my cap, but it was not so good for Laurel.
Yeah.
So I want to just push that a little bit more. What insights could you give to people in the squeezed middle who might still have to work and somehow find a way to juggle? What are the key things that you think they would need to pay attention to give this dignity, but still support at the level that they're able to?
Well, not being part of that, we also call it the sandwich generation. I would say one of the main things that I learned was you have to be comfortable in your role.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if you're not comfortable being the caregiver, I was fortunate with that, and I think my acting and my design experience all kind of came into play. Once I took on the role of a caregiver, that was it. That was my role, and I had to be okay with everything. You know, seeing my mother naked for the first time at 89, seeing what the years had done to her and gravity, and it's cruel.
Yeah.
and But I wanted my mom to be comfortable, so I took on that role, and I tried to, you know, if I had any problems with it, I kept it out of the room.
Right.
And because if you're not comfortable, your loved one will sense that, and they'll feel guilty, or they'll get angry that they put you in
Yeah.
a position and stuff like that. So if they can get somebody who is comfortable doing it, whether it's a family member or hire a professional person, I would definitely get a professional, at least to give you some training, because it's very helpful.
Yeah.
But that would be the main thing. You've got to be comfortable in the role. In my family, the two middle children were not comfortable doing anything hands-on. They helped in other ways, but they didn't touch my mother. And that was okay, because it would have been awkward or dangerous at that point, because you have to lift them and get them out of bed a certain way so you don't hurt them. Or hurt your own
or
back.
yourself. Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that would be the best thing. But again, it's tough to find somebody. Later on, I had some medical issues where my mom almost outlived me, and I could no longer do the physical lifting of her, because I carried her everywhere and put her in the wheelchair, and we went out on road trips and stuff like that. So we had I guess some adventures. But I could no longer do that. And so we hired somebody that my brother hired for one of his clients, and she was a joy, and very rare to find someone like this. So Marina was just terrific. And so she and I worked as a team from that point forward. And she was also a very strong woman. So she was very helpful.
Wow. I want to ask, though, I mean, Mark, you've spoken a lot about the practical skills that you had to develop and learn there, but I think you've spoken even more about mindset. It sounds to me like a lot of this is having the right mindset. You say you've got to be comfortable in the role. And I think your success, if that's the right description for it, in how this played out for you, is the mindset. A big part of it, at least, has to do with the mindset that you were able to adopt.
Yeah.
How would you encourage other people to get in the right mindset, to get that right mindset? Because if you don't have it, it sounds like this is not going to be a pleasant journey.
Yeah.
What encouragement do you have for people there?
So I have a motto, and I'm not sure when this started, but I've had a pretty adventurous life, and I've done a lot of fun things, some crazy things. You know, I gave up a really good design career to try the very secure acting life. And then I moved to France without really knowing the language and stuff. And I took my dad to Italy when he turned 80 to visit the little village where his father came from 100 years earlier.
I wonder what the name Porro. It sounded like something like that.
Pardon me?
The name Porro, is it an Italian name?
Yeah.
I was wondering. Yeah. I wondered that.
Yeah, and that was crazy, because my dad was 2 years away from dying from heart disease, so he was not in great shape, but he was willing to do it. And anyway, so my motto is find the joy. Whatever you are going into, there's so many negative things you could focus on. And in the world today, there's so many, well, I guess any day is a lot of negativity. If you look for the joy, it just takes so much, I guess, junk out of the way. And if you focus on the joy and not the negative, it makes it so much easier for you and any task you're doing. So you say, boy, this is going to be a challenge or whatever, but I'm going to make it fun. And one of my goals was to make mom laugh at least once a day. So I focused on those kind of things.
Tell us about the humor, because you said you bring humor into.
Yeah.
Do you have any for examples of how you used humor in the day to
Well,
day?
well, some of these will also be with my mom. So getting mom ready for the sponge bathing and stuff like that was a morning and evening a ritual, and at night there's some work involved. So you get her to the commode, and then you give her a sponge bath, and then usually body lotion and baby powder, and then the diaper. And just when I'm about to finish securing the diaper, she starts peeing on me. Now that's cute if you're a new mother with a brand new baby or something. But when your 90-year-old mother's peeing on you, it's not so cool.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Mom, come, why now? I'm just about to finish." And she says, "It's natural. And how can you be mad?" So I just said, "Start all over again." And there was another time. She asked me, she goes, "Why do you treat me so well?" I said, "Because I love you. You're my mother, and you deserve to be treated like a queen." And she burps.
Oh.
And I go, "Queens don't do that." And she says, "How do you know?" And while I was renovating the house, so she'd be sitting in the living room watching the Animal Planet that she liked to watch all the time. And I would be coming back and forth from the hardware store with 2x4s and all this stuff. So I'd be passing her on my way to the basement. That was the first floor that I renovated. And every day for a while, because of her dementia thing, she would say, "What is going on?" And I said, I'm making your house beautiful again." She goes, "Well, who's paying for all that?" I said, "You are. So cheer up. You may have to go back to work." And so she was, she was good. And so early on also, out of all the kids, she couldn't remember my name. And she had a wicked sense of humor. So I wasn't sure she was joking or not. But a few months into this, where I'm taking over, and I come in one morning and she says, "Now, what is it I call you?" And I said, "You're kidding, right?" And she says, "No." I said, "Name your children." She goes, "Laurel, Michael, Carol, David, DC." And completely stumped. I said, "And Mark." She goes, "Oh, Mark." And I thought I was good. And then she goes, "Mark with a K?" I said, "Yes, Mark with a K. You named me." She goes, "Okay." I said, "Your favorite son?" And that's when she said, "I don't have favorites." And I said,
Good
"Well, you have a
answer.
favorite to forget." So I have a chapter in my book, because at this point I'm wiping her butt several times a day. And so I have a chapter in the book, "Does wiping butt cause amnesia?" And now I believe I have proof that, in fact,
So who do you think the humor helped the most, mom or yourself?
oh my
You
God,
get through
well, me, definitely me, and those around us. I'm
Yeah.
not, I mean, she loved to laugh, and how much of it she was getting, I don't know. But seeing her smile and again pucker up for a kiss anytime were lovely. I guess affirmations or evidence that I was doing the right thing. So yeah, I'd say definitely both, but more me.
And this Mark, this is clearly a relationship focused podcast. A lot of our audience are very interested in relationships. What do you think this experience that you had did for your relationship with your mother?
Oh, well, I would say out of all my roles as an actor, this was the best role I ever played.
Wow.
Most important role, and certainly most impactful. I'll tell you this one story that I didn't realize until I've done several interviews for the book over the last year and a half or so. And if you read my story, it sounds like I went home to rescue my mom. And during my reflections on this whole process and stuff like that, I think that it may have been my mom rescuing me. because I've done some good things in my life. And again, like I said, I had a pretty adventurous life. But since I didn't have children or a wife, and so I didn't quite have a grasp of unconditional love until this incident. And witnessing the way my parents treated other people and brought us up was very important and played a big role in my taking over this job. And but mom gave, whether she meant to or not, or did it on purpose, was she gave me this opportunity, and luckily I jumped on it. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I thank her for that every day, because it was uh, I was with both of my parents when they passed. And my dad, I only had 8 days with him, and I tried to treat him like a king those last 8 days. And with my mom, the same thing. So both of them passed in their beds, in their homes. With one case, my one sister was with me with my dad, and my other sister was with me with my mom. They left this world in a way that most people would envy. It was just a beautiful thing. And I guess that's what gives me, I guess, a lot of comfort that I played a role in that. And yeah, so mom gave me that opportunity, and I guess my dad kind of did also.
It's very inspiring to hear you say that, because quite often when people say, it's so sad to see your parents declining, they're not the person they used to be, and in a sense, almost wanting to hurry their transition because they have changed in their abilities and in their memory and so
Put
on.
them out of their misery almost.
Yeah, but
Help them get through it.
I've always felt and shared that sometimes it's not just about them, it's about you and what it does to you in taking on this new role. And you've just said it so beautifully, the impact that it had in learning how to give unconditional love in a real meaningful way. What other reflections do you have now, having gone through the experience first with your dad and then the longer experience caring for your mom? Reflections on what it has done for you, how you look on the future differently, what else you might encourage others to do now before they get to that stage. Just what reflections?
Well, what I learned was the unconditional love, so that was important, but also empathy. And empathy came out of, I had an industrial design degree. So when you're designing, you have to have empathy for the end user of whatever you're designing. So that's where some of my design background certainly helped. And with acting as well, you need to understand that character and basically walk in their shoes. Or with my mom, it was, in her case, her non-slip safety socks. And so that was a very important lesson. And so I empathize with any senior citizens now. And a lot of my friends, I live in this small village in the south of France. And there's a number of expats here, but one of my favorite people is I call her Madame Simone, who's 90 years old now, French woman, and I see her walking everywhere. And it's lovely. And all the events, there's a lot of really fun events. It's a very artsy, creative town. And she's at all the events, and she just seems to be having the loveliest time. So I don't know if I gravitate towards older people, but there's a lot of retirees too. So a lot of my friends are in their 80s and stuff like that. And, we have, I guess we've lost some of the respect we have or used to have for our elders.
Indeed, yeah.
They've got experience and wisdom that we could all learn from.
Yeah.
And I think, in the older days, it used to be where you had those 3 generations in your house, and you had respect for your grandparents, and you could learn from them. I only had one grandparent. My grandfather passed when I think I was around 1. My Italian grandfather, and my mom's parents both died before she was married, so I never knew that side of the family. So my grandmother was great, and I really enjoyed her. But I lost her, I think, when I was around 15, and so that was a shame. But I saw the gift because we went to visit her quite a bit, and so it's. I would say unconditional love and the empathy are really important, but also patience.
Mhm.
Like you said, they're no longer the person you knew. They're slower. They're not going to be as agile. Their mind may not be as clear as it used to be. And you've got to be patient with whatever you get. And again, that's where I guess the empathy comes in as well. But there's sometimes like the title of the book came from learning patience because we had a commode near her bed because she could no longer get to the bathroom safely. And sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable for either one of us on the commode. So, her favorite beverage was a cup of hot tea, skim milk, no sugar. And kind of as a joke, I said one morning, while we're waiting, you want a cup of tea? She said, sure. So I made her a cup of tea and it was a hit. And that became one of our morning rituals. And
Amazing.
Cup of tea on the
there's another
commode.
ritual I wanted to, I learned another thing that's very important. And I have a chapter in a book about this too. So wanting to feel pretty doesn't end at 90. And for men either. A couple of days before my dad passed, he was always clean shaven and always had his hair combed. And I think he always had a comb in his wallet. And I knew that he was very religious. And so when he wanted to meet Jesus, he would want to be clean shaven and combed. So we combed his hair, and my sister and I gave him a nice shave a couple of days before he passed. And I know he enjoyed that. So he wanted to be as handsome as he could when he left this earth.
Wow.
With my mom, again, with the idea of returning dignity to her, she had 6 kids and she had a full-time job. She was a proofreader for the largest newspaper in New Jersey, but she worked the night shift. And she would come home, and how she did, she had beautiful nails. She was a nail model when she was in her late 20s. Late teens, early 20s. And so beautiful, long, natural nails. And so she would go to the beauty parlor. That would be her treat once a week, get the shampoo and set and get her nails done. And when she would visit me in LA, I would take her to my friend's beauty parlor in Beverly Hills. And she got the movie star treatment. I know she got that. Now, I don't know when I came back home, when the last time she was at a beauty parlor or when her hair was really taken care of. Now it was long and beautiful like she had it when she was younger. And so I created a thing called Day of Beauty, where I tried to recreate that experience at the house. So once a week, originally did it on Sunday, but being a good Catholic girl, she made me change it to Saturday. So heaven was still in the cards. And I would normally, she got the sponge baths twice a day anyway. But when she was on the commode, I soaked her feet in Epsom salts and I shampooed her hair. And then she gave her a full body massage and then with the body lotion and all that stuff. And then she picked her new wardrobe. And then I would blow dry her hair and put it in a ponytail, or for bonus points, once in a while, braid it. I lived with 3 sisters with long hair, so I learned a lot more than just put down the toilet seat for a guy. So this stuff all came in handy, later in life. And so, and then I would put her in the wheelchair and do her nails, and then finish it off with a nice bright red lipstick to match her nails. And I just thought this was a nice thing to do, no big deal. And so as I'm wheeling her into the kitchen for breakfast, we had a big round mirror in the dining room. And I parked her in front of that mirror and leaned in cheek to cheek and said, "Who's that pretty girl?" And she just beamed in the mirror. And I just, wow, this little gesture was just powerful.
Yeah.
And not only did it make her, again, I don't know the last time she even looked in a mirror or looked in the mirror and liked what she saw.
That. Yeah, exactly.
Whatever she saw that day was she loved.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
she probably said, "That's me again."
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there's so many practical things that you're sharing here, Mark. I think with dads and their daughters, for example, the mindset should be go into this kind of situation. If you're going in there with the same mindset, if you're looking after an elderly mom, think of it as looking after your daughter in the same way that you would have done her hair and made that look pretty and get her all dressed up to go out. Why not adopt the same thing here? Why does
right,
it have to be mom's sick and tired and she's in bed? I'm just going to treat her like that. So
right.
so many practical things. I'm conscious of time though. I would love to. How do people find out? How do people find out more about the book? What would you like to share? We'll put some stuff in the show notes. But what should we be pointing people who want to find out more? Where should
Well,
they
if
go?
they Google A Cup of Tea on the Commode, it's the only book. We're everywhere because I'm pretty aggressive with all the marketing and stuff like that. So we have the Facebook. The website is cupofteaonthecommode.org. We have Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr,
Okay.
now Blue Sky. It's everywhere. And there's a YouTube channel, Cup of Tea on the Commode, with all the I have probably 170 something teasers I've done, these little, and most of those are quite funny. Again, the humor plays a big role in it, and
Yeah.
so they'll find it there. And Amazon's the best I think source because they have it in the paperback, large print paperback, ebook, and also the audiobook.
Awesome. Give us a little synopsis. What's the book about? What can people expect to get? Is it a novel? Is it insights? Is it your reflections?
Well,
What's a,
it's a memoir, and I say it's not a how to book. It's a what I did book, and if they get
right?
some benefit out of it, great, because there are a lot of little practical things that I did.
Mm.
But I would say it's entertaining. There's a lot of funny stuff in there. There's a lot of backstory. So it's not just all about caregiving. It's a lot of the backstory are things that I grew up with or things my mom did that help support why I did what I did because of my
Yeah.
upbringing and stuff like that. And so, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty good. And now it's at this point it's won 15 awards, which is
Wow.
cool. And the
Amazing.
sales are nice, and yeah. But the personal notes I've received from people have just been
Yeah.
heartwarming and touching, and some very raw. You know, people who just lost a parent, and they said my book has helped them through that mostly because the humor. And I think those are just beautiful, and those are more
Wonderful.
meaningful than anything.
I was going to say, as we close, any final thoughts to leave with people who might be considering this whole idea of, do I parent my parent? How do I do this? What do I do? Should I just hand them over to somebody else who is better qualified and do that? What final words of encouragement or what final words would you share with people in that situation?
I would say again, do what you're comfortable doing. I mean, hopefully you have a good relationship with your parent, and they put up with you for at least 18 years, some a lot longer. So I think they deserve what we can give them, and hopefully it's as much as possible. So. Yeah, even if they have Alzheimer's or something, there's something special in there you got to
Mm,
focus on and
mm,
remember. And if you get those, we had some lovely moments, and that was the impetus for writing the book. Because I was privy to a lot of really touching moments and conversations that my siblings were going to miss. So I
mm.
just started recording all this stuff, and you don't want to miss those things because
Yeah.
they're very cool, and they will have more impact on you than you'll know.
Mm.
You know, Mark, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us who have aging parents because you've given such a compassionate, respectful, dignified, joyful approach to embracing this season, making it, treating them like royalty, putting the dignity
This
back,
natural season of
making
life.
it fun. Yeah, you've really re-inspired the way that we should approach this whole journey of parenting our parents. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And also, I like to say that sharing my story keeps my mom in the present, which is your
Mm.
gift to me. So I thank
Oh,
you for that.
It's been a joy. And I think on that note, for this episode, it's a wrap. Thank you so much.
bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Habits podcast. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, take our free relationship skills quiz at the4habits.com/skills quiz to start improving your relationships today. Hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.